Hello everyone, good evening. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, audible.
Yeah, I'll just share my screen. Just 1 second, class. 1 second. I'll share my screen. Okay, good evening everyone. My name is Rimchim, and can anybody confirm me if my screen is visible to everyone and I'm clearly audible?
Yes, ma'am, the screen is visible and you are audible.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, class, the topic for today's web development session is HTML and CSS. And talking about myself, my name is Rimjim, and I work as a cloud and infrastructure engineer on Azure, AWS, and GCP platform. And today, let's move ahead with the agenda. So today, our agenda is like I'll be teaching you what is HTML, what is CSS, how do we maintain a basic hygiene of writing a resume for web developers, and then what different type of tags in HTML, and then how do we create forms mainly. So yeah, this is our agenda, which is visible on the screen for today. And then let's move ahead. And in between class, if you just want me to go a bit slower, or if you want me to go a bit or to touch that topic in more depth, so you can always interrupt me in between, and I'll cover that in depth, or I'll love to clear all of your doubts. Okay. So yeah. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, so like what HTML is, so HTML is the language of the browser. So the current version of HTML which we are currently using is HTML5. And like whenever we are writing all these languages, for example, if we want to maintain or if you want to write HTML, or if you want to write Bootstrap, or if you're writing Parallax, or all these languages in your resume, so always class make sure that you're writing this under a topic which is mainly web languages, or you can write web languages, or you can write for front end languages in that case. But always make sure that you're maintaining a different header while writing this HTML, CSS, or while writing JavaScript, or any of these languages which are mainly web based. Okay. Because class, like the difference which I always mention in my, like, this is mostly the first class which I cover in this web developer series. So this is the only biggest mistake which everyone makes. Like always, whenever we are writing, we always have to make sure that we are maintaining a different header for HTML, JavaScript, and all these topics altogether. Because like the error here is, like, if you're writing Java, or if you're writing C++, and they're writing web HTML also, so that makes it wrong there, and we have high chances of getting our resumes deselected. Okay. So like HTML is not a programming language. That's why I always ask my students to make sure that we're maintaining a different header. Like we're not writing with other programming languages where we're writing HTML, and then where we're writing JavaScript and all those things, web front languages mainly. So the header which we should use is web front, or web based, or front end. Okay. And then like it's a standard markup language which is used to create the structure of web pages, and this language consists of elements that act as a building block in the creation of my structure of the web page. And then all the standards which we use, which we see in HTML. So for example, we have how do we use doc type, or how do we use my tags. So all these things, all the standards, it comes from www directly. And then we have CSS, which is used to style the web pages. So I'll be covering CSS in the later part of today's session. Let's just uh, see the structure. So whenever we are writing our program, so like the first thing which we mention is doc type HTML, and this is nothing but this declaration defines that the document is an HTML5 document. Okay, like whatever version which we are using there. So this sorry class, I have a bit of cough. So like this mainly defines that my document is an HTML5 document. And then later part, whatever we have in our declaration, so we have HTML, we have header, we have title. So like similar to the human body, how we have header section, then we have body part, then we have the ending part. Like other programming languages are defined in this manner itself. Okay, so we have the header section, we have the declaration section, like herein. Okay, so in HTML we have, in the header section we have the, we always have to make sure that we are defining HTML, like HTML tag and then header tag. These tags are mainly like, whenever we are writing HTML, this is mainly to define that this is my root element of the program. So if we miss writing HTML, we can miss writing doc type HTML, but we cannot miss writing HTML, because this is the root element of my program. If we miss that, we'll not like our program would not run. Okay, and then comes the header section, wherein we define the header things. For example, if my program is mainly to do addition, or if my this is my first program, so I'll mention the header section to define the clarity. Okay, and then we have title. So like this is mainly the browser's title whenever we are running our program. And then and then whenever we are writing a program, we always have to make sure that we are closing the tags which we're using. This is the main thing in HTML. So for example, if I'm using the header tag or if I'm using the title tag, always have to make sure that I'm closing these tags. Okay, then we have the body section, which is mainly the intentional section of my program. So whatever our intention is, or whatever our agenda is, so we always mention all those things in the body section of my program. So for example, my agenda is to add two numbers, or my agenda is to subtract two numbers, or my agenda is to create an HTML form, or to write a JavaScript program. So all those things always come in the body section of my program. Okay, and then today I'll be covering some tags also, like coming from basics to like higher level tags. So like H1 is a header tag, then we have P tag, then we have V tag. There are a lot of tags in HTML which we use, and like if we are more frequent using those tags, we'll be familiar. Okay, so let's just move ahead. The next topic for today is DNS. So what DNS is, and this is one of the most important topics for today's session. Okay, so I know all of you know what HTML is, what CSS is, but many people do not know what DNS is, what is forward lookup zone, or what is reverse lookup zone. Okay, so in DNS, what we have is, DNS is mainly the phone book of the internet. Okay, so like what is our agenda is, so whenever we are developing our web pages, we should know the back end of what is happening to our web pages. So like let's come to that session. So in DNS we have two lookup zones. We have a forward lookup zone and then we have a reverse lookup zone. So whenever we are writing a query, so for example, in my browser I'm searching www.google.com. Okay, so what, like since we all know that computer doesn't understand English languages, so what, how it understands the functionality behind is forward lookup zone. So whenever I'm writing google.com, so in return I'll be, my what my server would be doing is, it would be converting my FQDN, which is www.google.com, which is fully qualified domain name, into an IP address, and then it would be looking into my cache, and then it would browse the the DNS records which are there in my computer, or then it would go to my system checks further. Okay, so like this is what is forward lookup zone. Like whenever I'm filing a query which is nslookup followed by the FQDN. So if my FQDN is a fully qualified domain name, for example google.com, and in return if I'm getting an IP address of my server, of my DNS server, or of that particular web page which I'm filing, so this is a forward DNS. Okay, and reverse DNS is like, if I'm already knowing what is the IP address of google.com, so I'll type nslookup and then the IP address, and in return my server would be returning an IP address which is of the web page, the IPs which I have fired. Okay, so let me just run it. Will be opening command prompt, and then in my command prompt what I'll do is, like let's just do for learnovate here. This is our site. So what I'll do is, like this is my FQDN which I'll be using for today. So how the browsing happens in backend is, I have copied this, and then let's just type an nslookup command. This is my forward DNS. So nslookup followed by the FQDN of my web page. Okay, so I have hit an enter. So like the IP address which I've got is 68.183.233.96. Okay, this is nothing class, this is my private IP address. I'll teach you how IPing also works. So let me just control C here. So this is my forward DNS, and then let me just type nslookup. DNS lookup and then the IP addressing, and then let me just hit enter. So in return, I'll be getting the what do we say? In return, I'll be getting the FQDN of my web page. So this is the difference between a forward lookup zone and a reverse lookup zone. So every web developer should know how querying works in the backend. There are later advanced things also which I'll tell you. For example, like if you want to find the IP address of like if you want to find the configurations of your IPing of this particular laptop, so we'll be typing ipconfig command, which will show how configurations are there and done in my PC. So to understand, like many people know how HTML works, what are the queries, what are the tags, but we should also know like how the configurations happened in backend. Okay, so for example, like whenever I'm typing learnovate.ecommerce.com, I'm getting this web page. So like if consider this as a fresh laptop, okay, so how it would happen in a fresh laptop, or consider this I'm browsing this site for the second time on this particular PC. So how it would happen? Anybody is having any answers? How querying works basically. Class, am I audible? Am I clear? Okay. So like basically how querying happens is like if you go for interviews, this is the basic question which is asked, like how querying happens. So we all know, like I taught you how forward lookup zone and how reverse lookup zone works. But the basic functionality here is like, for example, I'm typing this learnovate.ecommerce.com for the second time in this particular laptop. So how it would go is like first it would try to fetch my cache. Whenever I hit enter my PC, like it would try to like the server DNS server, it would try to fetch the things which are there in my cache. Like in my cache, did I ever search learnovate.ecommerce.com or not? So the first check is always my cache. The second check is always my DNS records. So we have DNS records. I'll mention in chat. Kindly refer it and then kindly like go through what are DNS records. If anybody is having any doubts, I'll clear that in next session. So go for DNS records, learn that. What are DNS records? So like whenever any browsing is done, so how it is done is like it would check my cache first. It would go to my system's cache and then it would check if there's any history for this learnovate.ecommerce.com or not. If it is not getting in my cache, it would go and search in my DNS records. So for example, we have A record, we have triple A record, we have 4 times A record. So we have 3 times A for IPv4, we have 4 times A for IPv6, and then we have SOA, we have NS lookup, we have what do we say? We have MX records for mail exchange. Okay, to try to go and then study in a bit deeper manner. Okay, and then also the other concept here is like here in my IPv4 address is 192.168.0.104. So anybody knows what class of IP address is this? Anybody can tell me what is the class of this particular IP address? Class 192 dot comes in which class? In which classes of IP address? Are we all aware of classes of IP addressing? Guys, I always want everyone to be a bit interactive, because if I'm only speaking and you guys are silent, then it doesn't make any sense. I know, Rishabh, it is IPv4, but I want to know what is the class of that particular IP address. 192.168.0.104 comes in which class? Or it's is it a public IP address or it's a private IP address? I also want to know this. These are very basics class. Anybody is knowing, or you want me to explain IP in class, or should I just go ahead with HTML? Okay, class, let me just tell you. So in IP, we have classes of IP address. So for example, we have IPv4 and then we have IPv6, and then in both we have a public IP address and then we have a private IP address. Okay. So in public IP address, what we have is we have class A, class B, class C, D, and E. Okay. So in class A, the range is 0.0.0.0 till we have 126.255.255.255. This is my first class of IP addressing, and then we have class B, which is 128.0.0.0. Okay, and then it is till 191.255.255.255. Okay, and then similarly we have class C from 192.0.0.0 till 223.255.255. Okay, so always make sure, class, just brainstorm this topic a lot, understand what IPing is, because this is the most important topic which everybody should know. Okay, learn what is IPing, what is IPv4, what is IPv6, what are the classes of IP addressing, and then what is subnetting. So for example, like in this entire world, we have so many PCs, we have so many websites. So how this IPing works, we have only 5 classes of IP addressing with a subnet of 255 to 255 to 255. Okay, so how this works is like we have subnet mask. Okay, so what subnet mask is, it defines or it distributes my IP addresses into smaller instances. Okay, so for every IP addressing we have, so for example, herein I have 4 classes. Okay, and then we have 4 octets of IP addressing, and then all my 4 octets is then divided into subnets. So how my subnets is divided, it is divided into smaller instances of IP addresses. So that's why we have this IPv4. Okay, and that's how still we are having machines, and we are having websites with IPv4, because we have subnets, we have subnet masks which distinguishes it. Okay, so let's just move ahead. So this is a concept class which is DNS, and then in DNS, as I told you, we have a forward lookup zone and then we have a reverse lookup zone. So in forward lookup zone, we have a query which is ns lookup, and then we fire the fqdn in ahead of my ns lookup command, and then if we are doing reverse lookup, ns lookup with the IP addressing, and then in reverse we get the website's name. Okay, so this is my DNS, which is mainly the phone book of my internet. So like this is mainly compared to how we are saving people's contact in our phone. So we save mainly names to numbers. So this is also, DNS is also converting from names to numbers. Like if we have FQDN, the numbers is the IPing part. Okay, and then let's move ahead with the HTML and CSS. So what is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. This element is mainly used for designing my web pages. Okay, so whenever I'm designing, for example, I'm having a calculator, so the structure of my calculator would be my HTML, like how my structure I'm building. The designing of that particular calculator or designing of any kind of HTML element in that particular program would be my CSS, like I'm using inline CSS, or I'm using internal CSS, or I'm using external CSS to design my calculator, and the functionality which I'm giving to that particular calculator, I'll give it through JavaScript, or I'll give it through Bootstrap, or I'll give it through any other HTML element. Okay, so mainly CSS saves a lot of work. It can control the layout of multiple web pages all at once, and CSS is used to define style for your web pages, including the design, layout, and variations, as I talked. Okay, so let's just move ahead. This is what I was talking about. So for example, we are having a calculator. So the structure I'll be defining through my HTML. HTML would define the structure so that I can write my program, and then we can just design that particular calculator using CSS. Similar to a human body, we have head, body, and all those things, footer. So that this is HTML, and then if we cover ourselves, or if we design ourselves, or if we provide some basic functionality or basic not functionality, sorry, if you provide give basic like fashion element to ourselves, so this is what we can say. In HTML also we use CSS to give a fashion to my web pages. Okay, let's just come ahead to syntax. So like we have CSS. So in CSS we have a selector part, and then we have a declaration part. Okay, so what is the selector and declaration is? Selector would be any h1 element, and then in declaration part what I'll be doing is I'll be using a property and I'll be using a value. So property would be like, for example, color. I can, this is my property, so I can give any value to my property. I can give blue, red, yellow, whatever is there. And another property is font size, so I can give any value, 12 px, 13 px, any kind of numbering or any kind of value for my font size. Okay. So HTML, this CSS is always divided into two sections. One is a selector section and the other one is declaration section. And then whenever we are distinguishing two property and a value, so whenever we are distinguishing a property and a value, we have to make sure that we're using a semiquotes in between, semicolon. Okay. This is colon, yeah. This is colon. We're using a colon in between, and then whenever we are differentiating two declarations, we have to make sure that we're using a semicolon. Okay. This is what is written here. The declaration block contains one or more declarations separated by semicolons, and then each declaration includes a CSS property, name and a value separated by a colon, and then two declarations are separated by a semicolon. Okay, and then all these things comes inside a curly braces. Okay, so all this declaration thing, either we are declaring 10 things, or if we're declaring 20 things, we have to always make sure that we are declaring it in a curly braces. Okay, and this is the syntax of how we are declaring a CSS element. So I'll be using my style.css, and then in this particular page I'll be styling this. Okay, so we have inline CSS, which inside the line only I'll provide an element to my CSS element, and then we have internal CSS where inside the header section, and then it applies to the body section, whatever is the below content. Let's come down. And then we have table tags. So how do we declare a table? So whenever we are creating a table, we have to make sure that we're using this particular tag, which is table tag, and then I'm using these three elements, which is table row, table header, and table data. Okay, so these three elements are mainly, so if I'm creating rows, so I have to make sure that I'm using this table row, and then I'll be giving headers to my table using th tag, and then if I'm feeding some data in my table, I have to make sure that I'm using td tag. Okay, and then in table also, like, I'll be creating an opening table tag and a closing table tag. Okay, and then next comes a form. So forms are mainly, like, for example, if you're seeing any kind of web pages. So for example, if we see learn wait page, so we have buttons, we have checkboxes, we have radio buttons, so we have a drop down. So how do we create all those things? Those are mainly like what comes under HTML forms. Okay, so whenever we are creating forms, we always have to make sure that we are having a opening form tag and a closing form tag, and whatever comes in between, those are the form elements. So let's just come down, and then let's just treat this also. An HTML form is used to collect user input. So for example, if we have to give some feedbacks, or if we are just uploading some resumes, or so that is mainly a form. So for example, there would be a file upload button, or there would be a button to enter some text, or to enter some password, or to enter name, or to enter any kind of stuff. So those mainly comes under HTML forms. So the next, so we have an input element of my HTML form. So we have my input type can be text, or my input type can be radio, or my input type can be checkbox, or submit button, or a normal button. Okay, so like if I'm using text, so it displays a single text line field, or if I'm using radio, it displays a radio button for selecting one or many choices. Okay, and then mainly it is radio button is for true or false, select one option. Okay, and then we have check boxes for selecting multiple options. So for example, like, when we have three answers to be selected, so in that case I'll be using check boxes. And then we have submit buttons to submit the form. We have input type button, which displays a clickable button. Okay, class, any I hope the concepts are getting clear, and then nobody's having any doubts. So the next element is text field. So my input type is text, and then in this particular text box, like, this is the form, this is the syntax for my text box. So input type would be text, and then I'll be using first name, and then I'll be using input type as text. So for example, what text is, for example, let me just show this web page. Yeah, so if we see, this is text box, this is so all these things are my text box. This is label, this is my submit button. Okay, so this is a form which we have used. Okay, so let's just come to the web page. So we have input type as text. Okay, And then we have text boxes as I showed you, and then we have label, which is mainly used for display purposes. Okay. Then we have like the syntax is almost similar class for everything here in HTML form. So for example, if I'm using a text, if I want a single text box, I'll be using input type is equal to text. Or if I'm using a radio button, if I want to display a radio button, so for that I'll be using input type is radio. Okay. And then we have a file upload. So file uploads are mainly whenever we are those things, like whenever we are uploading a resumes, or if you're uploading any kind of file, or if you're uploading any of our photos or signatures. So for that we use file upload element of our HTML form. Okay. So mainly for file upload, my input type is different. My input type is file, and then I give in particular ID for my file, and then name for that particular file name, and then I'll submit that particular file. Okay. And then rest all are just similar, same. So with this, I have covered all the content. And this is also submit thing class. So to submit all the things which I have pasted in my web page, or if which what I have typed in my web page, I'll be using my submit button. Okay, to submit everything in my web page. Any doubts, class, till here? Okay, if not, let's just move ahead with the programming section. Thank you so much for confirming. So let's just move ahead with the basic programs for today. So today I'll be covering one basic program, how to show how all the elements are being displayed, how we use different type of tags in HTML, and then I'll create a simple form for all of you, and then I will do all the running of all the programs. For example, like checkboxes, using checkboxes, radio buttons, text buttons, and all those things. Okay, so let's just start. I'll erase this, but make sure class you're doing this. I hope everybody has noted this particular thing down of IP addressing. Like as I told you, the first thing which I'll use in my program is doc type. So this is the root element. This is the root element of my program. Even if we do not write this doc type HTML, we'll not get any errors. But we have to make sure that we're using this HTML tag. This is important. The first doc type HTML I'll be using is mainly to find out the version of my HTML. So I have used an opening HTML tag, and then I'll be using, for example, let's say I'll write head, and then let me just write a title also to show you where I'll get my title. First program, say program, and then let me just close. So in HTML class, always remember to close your tags. Whatever tags you use, make sure that you're closing it. Let's come to the body section. Body section of my program. Mainly in this program, what I'll do is like I'll show you the different header tags. So for example, we have h1 tag. So the number decreases as we come down. So h1 is the highest thing. H1 would have the higher font, and then h2 would be a bit lesser, and then h3 again would be lesser than h2. So it is like this. Okay. Just close this particular tag also. So these are the tags. Then h2, h3, and here it should be h2. Somebody told me. H3, and again let me just close this program. Sorry. This is the thing. And whenever you're using HTML class, like if you're using Notepad++, like this is the simplest which I use always. So if you're using Notepad++, you'll always get whenever you're writing opening tag, closing tag would come automatically. Or if you're using Visual Studios, so you'll not get this tag. But if you're a beginner in HTML, I'll always suggest you to use basic notepads, so that it's easy for you to like debug the errors and all those things. So desktop I have. Yeah, so that's right. First, whenever we are saving our program, we always have to make sure that we are saving it with .html. Okay. save. Just go to that folder. So this is how. So this is my first header. This is my h1. This is my h2. This is my h3. And then to show you where my title appears. So title always appear in the browser head. So this is what I have written in my title, and it would always appear whatever I'm writing in my title. It would appear in the upper ribbon of my web browser. Okay. So let's just cover some more tags. So for example, let me just show you, like if I want to write my tag or if I want to write a particular paragraph. Okay, so I'll be using p tag for that. This is my paragraph. That is, let's say anything, and then I'll close my paragraph. So this is my p tag, which is mainly used for paragraph, and then we have b tag. We have b tag for bold. So we always close this tag also slash b. Okay, we have bold. We have italics also. We have I tag for italics. We will close I tag also. And then we have other tags, which is mainly if you want to mark a particular text. Okay, for that we use mark tag. This all these things class will come to know whenever we are using this HTML very frequently. So if you want to delete a particular thing or if you want a striker to a particular text, use the el tag. Okay, so delete, and then we'll have the el tag closing. Okay, so let me just save Control S and then refresh this particular browser. So yeah, if you can see here, like this was my bold tag, this is my italics tag, this is my mark tag if I want to mark any kind of text, or if I want to delete, or if I want to have a striker thing, I'll be using this particular tag. Okay, I hope this is clear, class. Okay, so the next tag for today would be like let's just try to add a particular what do we say link to my program. So how do we add links, or if you want to embed any kind of web pages, we'll be using a link tag. So example, to add links, so in the body section of my program, what I'll be doing is I'll be using a tag. So mainly like a tag defines my hyperlink, and then we have href tag, which would define my what do we say, which would define the url. Okay, so a href tag for the url is equal to my url in the braces. So let's just go here and copy the url. And then this is my url would always come in the braces. Okay, control v, and then after this like whatever we are writing, this is a link. So for example, if I click on this thing, it will redirect to the web page. Okay, this is a link, and then let me just close, make sure to close my a tag also slash a, and then I've already closed my html and then my body section. Okay, let me just go here. So if you can see, if I click on it, it would redirect me to the Lonovate web page. So this is what was HTML uh, uh, link tab. Okay, link. How do we add links in my program? So the next tag, what do we do is like let's create a form, like to upload a file. How do we upload a file whenever we are creating a form? I have very bad cough. Body. So like in the body section of my program, what we have to do is we have to create a form here. So I'll be using form tag. Let's just come out of form, and then for example, like I'll be doing is like I'll be uh, having a text box which would allow me to write my name and then I'll be having another text box which would allow me to write my second name, and then I'll be having a submit button and a file button to upload a file and then to submit that particular page. Okay, so what I'll do is label. I have to use a label tag for first name. This is mainly class to display a thing. Okay, so first name, and then let me just close label, and then like I want it in two different lines, so I'll be using a here tag also break to break this particular. What I'll do is, so for example, for this I want input type to be text. So I'll write here input type is equal to text. And then again I want a line break here, so I'll use a break. Okay, and what I'll do is for second name I'll copy this thing because I don't need to repeat it again. And then as I told you, to upload a file, what do we have to do is we have to use input type as file. If you remember in the slides I have covered that. Input type is equal to file, and then we have to give an ID for this particular file, so I'll give ID. ID is mainly class whenever if we are having some PHP context. So all these things also I would require an ID if I'm writing a PHP program, but since I'm not using PHP here, there is no backend. Okay, so name would be fine then, and then that's the end, and then I want to submit button. So I'll use the type equal to submit. So the form which I have created slash form, and then control S, and let's just go and rerun this particular thing. Okay, so if you see, like I can write my first name here, I can write my second name here, and then I can choose any file from my thing. So for example, let's go on desktop. Yeah. Let's go on this JavaScript, and then if you want to upload this particular file, I can upload this file, and then I can click on submit button. Okay, so this is a form which we create in HTML. Okay, and then similar to this class, like if I want to, I have the programs already with me, so I'll not, since we've already exceeded with the time, so I'll show you the programs I have with me. So for example, if I want to write a program to uh, embed an image, okay, so if I want to write a program to for example, to use the image tag, so what I'll have is I have to use the img tag. So img tag is mainly to embed any kind of images in my program, and then I have to use a src tag to give the path of my particular image. Okay, so here in my image name is Dia8, and then always make sure class, this is a very common doubt which I get when you're writing assignments. So what do we have to do is, like whenever you're writing this image tag program, you always have to make sure that this particular path which you have given and the code which you're writing, it should always fall in the same folder. It should be at the same place. Okay, and even if it is not in the same place, make sure that the path which you have mentioned should always be there. So for example, if you're running a resume program, which is your assignment, so whenever you're writing that, always make sure that the photo and the code is always at the same place, or you, the path which you have mentioned, it is or that particular photo is there in your folders. Okay, so you have to note this down and then make sure that you're not making this error. So this is my image code. Okay, so let me just run this code, so I'll get my image here. Okay, so this is an image program, like how do we embed images in my HTML program. And then file upload I have covered. We have checkboxes, as I told you, like the only difference is like input type I used as checkbox, input type I used as text. So herein I'll be using input type as checkbox, or I'll be using input type as radio button whenever I'm using checkboxes. So let me just run this also. So I can just select any of these options. Like if we want to select one or more options, you always have to make sure that we're using checkboxes. And then I have this table program. Okay, let me just show you this also. This is, all these things are easy ones, so I'm not. So whenever we are using table tag, we always have to make sure that we're using um, these three tags, which is a tr tag for table row, th tag for header, and then we have td tag to feed in data to my table. Okay, so this is how we create a table. I hope it's clear, class. Any doubts anybody is having? where are we? Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice evening. Bye bye.